Good evening, everyone. This is Mike Romelli here with the special tropical outlook and discussion for May 12th, 2020, recorded around 8:10 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, the National Hurricane Center has now upped this area of interest to a 70% chance of development over the next 5 days, with still near 0% chance over the next 48 hours. An area of low pressure could develop into a subtropical or tropical system this weekend into early next week. Across the area shaded in red there. Anywhere in that area could see that center of low pressure form and begin to kind of take shape and establish. The next update from the National Hurricane Center is expected around 9 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. Jumping straight into the GFS model, this is the 18Z run valid as of 1 o'clock this afternoon. We'll just kind of jump out here to roughly about 72 hours. You notice here on the 18Z run, a couple of things of note here. We've started to see some signs in the European and the GFS that there could be an area that tries to develop in the Bahamas, but also the fact to take note of is that now the GFS is falling more in line with the Euro, and it's not exactly trying to develop things way out here away from the coastlines anymore. Actually, it has shifted back further west. Now, whether that's a trend that actually continues or not, we'll have to see. That definitely throws a monkey wrench in things, though, because that could, interfere with some of the development of the system. What I mean by that, we'll take it out to hour 84. You do notice that this area of vorticity that was trying to develop should have been over here on the 12Z GFS, but on the 18Z GFS, this has ended up actually closer to the Florida coast and the Bahamas. What that's going to do is, if this scenario were to pan out, which again, this is still several days away, this is still 84 hours plus out, so things are going to change between now and then. The main takeaway is we want to watch trends. Right now, trends are our best friend in this sort of situation per se. And this is what we want to watch. Is this a trend that continues, or is it something that is only shown by one run and that's it? But the GFS does show this area of development over the next 84 hours that could be getting closer to bring some sensible impacts to the Florida coastline. Now, what do I mean by impacts exactly? Maybe some rain, maybe 1 to 2 inches of rain, maybe some squally conditions, maybe some wind gusts in those squally conditions, but nothing significant. This is not going to be a Hurricane Dorian. This is not going to be a hurricane by any stretch of the imagination. We'll touch why it's not going to be here in a little bit. But for the most part, we are generally only talking about maybe some smaller impacts, but still sensible impacts for you to be mindful of. Rain and wind, that could dampen any plans that you have outside, that could put a hamper on those sort of things. So understand that it is almost a hurricane season. We need to be starting to prepare now. The 2020 Atlantic hurricane season is almost here. We need to start preparing and have a plan in place. By hour 96, this leaves some stretched out vorticity from near the Florida coastline all the way through, and then we eventually try to get something to more so establish right off the Florida coast in the southeastern United States. Now, the total accumulated QPF forecast from the GFS just to about hour 120 does show the suggestion that this increased potential for the system to becoming closer would bring the threat for enhanced rainfall along the coast, but you do notice those numbers drop off remarkably, pretty rapidly over the Florida Peninsula. South Florida is going to have the better chance of getting rain from this system at all. But again, will you have 3 inches or will you have a half inch? That's still to be determined with the exact track and location of this system as things begin to form. We know that the model trends have definitely shifted a little bit further, but there's still some models that develop this thing far enough away that South Florida and the Bahamas will not get any impacts. Either way, it is looking more and more likely that we will have a system begin to take shape across this region by this weekend into early next week. Now, with that being said, this is the 500 millibar height anomaly. We are taking a look here at where the steering of this storm could go, and we'll roll it out here to just about where this thing is forming, about 84 hours. We notice that there's a pretty strong Bermuda high out here right now, but that Bermuda high has weakened a little bit with this troughingness and this low pressure area right across here. And we kind of shift that out to about hour 96. We do notice that we do have over this top here, we do have the ridging trying to build in. So the storm is not going to be accelerating with any trough or anything remarkably out to sea that quickly. Because only by hour 120, we'll skip to hour 120 here, we do still have this ridging in place to its north. The system is pretty shallow at 500 millibars, so this is looking pretty high in the atmosphere, but this is pretty shallow. It's not a very deep storm at all, so this would likely be with the low level flow, which is more so off to the north and east, but still obviously any low pressure cannot just penetrate this big entire area of high pressure. But with time, we do expect some sort of troughiness to catch this and pull it on out to sea. And you do notice then we still have that around by hour 150, but we start to get a lot more troughiness. That ridge starts to abate, and this storm will begin to carry itself off to the north and east, steering closer to Bermuda. Again, Bermuda could have some impacts to it, rain for the most part. Pretty much the same thing with Bahamas and the South Florida coastline there. This is taking a look here at the European, this 12Z run that we went over earlier this afternoon. You do notice pretty much the same thing. This has development a little bit further to the east of the GFS. Remember, the GFS was right here. The European is suggesting that right there. But again, there still could be some sensible impact to the South Florida coast, especially the Bahamas, though. Could see some rain, squally conditions, again, in places that were impacted by Hurricane Dorian last year, places that are still ongoing with recovery efforts. That could be something to just kind of keep a mindful eye on. If we take a look here at this, is the 500 millibar anomalies coming off the GFS to just about the initiation time where we start to get this to develop. You do notice even on the GF or the European model rather, this doesn't show up very well. Again, this is sort of our trough that we are beginning to watch here with this big ridge setting in over top. We're watching this trough as well. What this trough is going to do is this is going to weaken this ridge of high pressure, and with a building ridge out across the central United States moving east as well, and with this little bit of low pressure out here, this is at by hour 150. This should generally allow this storm to be carried safely out to sea and away from land. But again, this is hour 150. If we stretch out back to about hour 120, we do notice that several things would have to take shape here. This big bulge of low pressure and lower anomalies suggesting troughiness, that would have to shape the way for this big ridge to develop and shift further east. But also this would be our trough over here, which would be over Iowa at that point in time, Iowa and those states. And really what that would do is if this would actually be weaker, what would end up happening is this ridge would be stronger and not necessarily move out of the way. That could set up a blocking period. Again, there's a lot of things that could come into play here, but for the most part, we are expecting this trough right here to break down this ridge, and that will allow for the storm to go out to sea with a building area of high pressure out here, which is going to be shifting off to the east. And that is going to generally favor storm motions to be away from the coastline. But again, this is still so far out in time that we don't really have a general idea of what could happen even that far out. Even with the technology, we just don't have that sort of information. We still have to get a lot of the upper air soundings, depending on, if high altitude recon, if they decide to go out and fly. I doubt they would, but if they do, obviously that will be of helpful data to us. So this is the updated, well, not really the updated, but this is a higher resolution SST anomalies chart from the NOAA Ocean website here. Again, this area where our system would be forming, supposedly, is going to be in an area of warmer anomalies, but I'll show you it's not really dramatically warm. It's not exceptionally warm waters here that we're talking about, but generally this would be in a track though where if this managed to find a favorable pocket, this could try to transition into somewhat of a warm core system. but we've generally seen idea and model solutions that favor a subtropical component of nature to anything that is going to try to develop this weekend into next week into the Bahamas. It generally favors a non-warm core system, well, some warm core characteristics, but more of a subtropical baroclinic type system and not so much of the tropical, truly tri-tropical in nature. But again, things will fall in place with time and we'll really see how that pans out. But taking a look really at the anomalies, it's not really all that impressive, but anomalies certainly are running about a half degree to a degree Celsius above the long-term average, and that could play a little bit of a favor in the role of actually the system developing. So that's going to be one thing that we're going to be keeping an eye on. And this is the CDAS temperature from tropicaltidbits.com. You do notice that this area out here is in an area of about 26 to 27 degrees Celsius waters. That is right on the threshold for tropical systems to be able to develop and thrive in that environment. However, we do know that some systems like Florence, like Hurricane Florence back in 2018, survived in ocean temperatures that were actually cooler than 27 and 28 degrees Celsius. And that could be the same thing with whatever system decides to develop here in the Bahamas this weekend into early next week, that we could be seeing a more instability in the atmosphere to provide for more thunderstorm development, because anytime that you really have warmer ocean temperatures and extremely cold temperatures aloft, you get that instability, and that will favor tropical systems to develop and thrive in that sort of environment. So again, we could be seeing that, but time will tell with this. And again, another thing really hindering any significant development of this into a big hurricane or anything is the ocean temperatures just do not support it. The upper ocean heat content does not support it, and there's fairly strong wind shear across this region. This was updated about 21Z, so just a little past 2 o'clock this afternoon. You notice this is our old dying front out across here that's now just to the west of Puerto Rico. And we do notice that we still have 60 to 70 knots of wind shear across this whole entire area. The wind shear will be abating really over the next coming days, but still, there's still a significant chance that there will still be some pretty strong wind shear across this region, inhibiting significant tropical development. And certainly with that wind shear, we don't really expect, or the low ocean temperatures combined with the wind shear, we don't really expect much to be happening. The upper ocean heat content values are just not there yet. It is the very early season. This is not, we are not talking about August type weather here. We are talking about May 12th weather, and that suggests that we will not see a very strong system. At very best, this could become a 45 mile per hour subtropical or tropical storm. But again, time will tell, and we'll really have to see what the models and what the data really hints on over the next coming days. Bottom line is that an area of interest will be designated Invest 90L probably tomorrow or the following day. The National Hurricane Center has upped the chance of formation to a 70% chance. The next update will be tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. Of course, I will be back tomorrow with the latest information. Hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Stay safe, everyone. Stay tuned, and I'll see you again tomorrow.